you very much, Jose. I really appreciate the invitation. I'm sorry I'm not able to speak in Spanish, but maybe you can follow anyway. Um, I was very touched by the words that the rector and the vice rector gave, their call for wisdom and for putting humans in the center of our educational experience. So I think that we have a deep belief about what is important in education, a deep shared belief. And I'd like to start from that point. I'm going to share my screen to share my presentation. Okay, are you able to see that now?
Yes, thank you.
Wonderful. Okay. So I'm going to start talking about human wisdom and artificial intelligence with a few words first about what do we mean when we talk about artificial intelligence. And then we'll get to human wisdom at the end. I'll give a general introduction to what we mean by AI. I'm going to try to give a call for attention to humanistic issues at the end, and also some roads for future development. Now, this is an enormous topic, so in half an hour or 45 minutes, I'm not sure if we're going to cover the entire territory, but I think what I can do is I can give you an introduction, and maybe this will open roads for future collaboration. And I will be giving some links along my presentation to further reading. So, three questions to begin with. What do we mean by artificial intelligence? Then a brief part about what it can help us do. This is in very fast development, so perhaps some of these questions are things that will be changed in the near future. And then a bit of time dedicated to the question about, is it really intelligent? Often when we talk about artificial intelligence, we don't really know what we mean. And we kind of make an analogy between what a machine can do and what a human can do. But there are many questions about what we really mean by intelligence and what does this mean for humans. And then there'll be a question and answer period at the end. So as you very generously gave an introduction to me, I don't have much to add. I have a kind of varied education. I've studied many different topics and I've given conferences around the world in a variety of places. So let's jump in. What are we talking about when we talk about AI? Well, the first example I'm going to give is based on the jacket I'm wearing today. So imagine if this pattern that you can see in the colors on my jacket is like squares on the ground, and you're standing on one of the blue squares. Would you be able to predict what color the next square would be if you jump off an edge? Or what if you step off the corner? And if you look at it, you can see that from a blue square in the direction of the sides, you go to a sort of middle blue and yellow color. And if you step off the edge or the corner, then you step onto the yellow color, the pure yellow color. So as you go down the pattern, you can predict what the next color will be based on where you are. This is a very simple example of pattern recognition. And of course, there are variations in this picture. You can see that where the fabric is folded or where there's a seam, the pattern changes. And it changes slightly, but it changes in ways that can also be predicted. You can see the way that the blue becomes narrower as it goes down the seam on the coat. So a very simple example, what do we mean by artificial intelligence? We mean something that can recognize a pattern. Now, this is the same problem when I was building an algorithm to predict how many people would be in the hospital tomorrow. And this is something my company recently did. We were working with a European project of 26 hospitals where they want to use this information to improve the quality of their service. This is a form of artificial intelligence too. You can see that in the graphic, the number of people at any given moment changes quite a lot. And predicting the future at the current time, which is time 0, we predict into the future 24 hours, and the model predicts the green dot, and the X means that's the truth about the future, because this model is built on information that we actually already have. We know what the answer is. And you can see that the model is able to do a pretty good job because even though it's unexpected that the number would jump up so high, there it is. It's predicting, and that is the truth of the actual number of people in the hospital. So another example of what we mean by artificial intelligence. Now, let's look at this a little bit more in detail because what it means to predict the future looks like just a very strange black box. We don't know what is inside. So let's look at a simple example. In Italy, when I first moved here, you could buy a good gelato, which is one of the best foods in this country, for 1,500 lira. But then the lira was replaced with the euro. And then the question was, how many euros do I need to buy a gelato? And you can sort of guess now, we need a magic number, something that will convert one number into the other. Now, this is very simple. You probably can do it without much trouble. You say 1,500 lira is the number of the cost. And then we have a translation. There are 1,936 lira in 1 euro. So we can do the math. It's very simple. We can also express this as a product. We can also say, instead of the division that I have in the first row, we can express it as the product of a small number. Now, this is what I'm calling a magic number that will convert between the two currencies. So at the bottom of the screen, you see the original cost times this magic number equals the new cost in euros. So we're predicting the future, in a sense. We're predicting what will be the value of this object in a different currency. Now, that was a very simple example. Let's look at a little bit more difficult example, the one in the hospital. So how can we predict how many people will be in the hospital tomorrow? Well, in my case, I have information coming from this network of hospitals every 3 minutes. I have information about how many people have a sort of a minor difficulty, code green, how many people have a medium difficulty, code orange, how many are very sick, code red. So there are different kinds of information that the hospitals send me every 3 minutes. I have 50 different kinds of information, 50 variables. So what I'm looking for is a magic number, again, that I can multiply times all of that information that is coming in from the hospitals. And it'll tell me my 23rd column, the number of people who are waiting in the hospital room. It's in Italian because one of the hospitals is in Italy. So this is now a more complicated situation. I have 50 variables I must multiply by something in order to give me my answer. So in this case, I have a matrix. It contains hundreds of numbers, and this large matrix using linear algebra is multiplied by those 50 variables, and it gives me an output. It tells me if I can find the right numbers to put in that black box, then I can multiply and find at the output, for example, tomorrow there will be 23 people in the emergency room at this time. So it's the same idea as what I did before with converting between two costs, but this time the number is not just one number, it's several hundred numbers. Now, the way that we build that number, or that matrix of numbers, is that we have a long period in the past, several years of information, where we know all of those 50 variables, and we know the right answer, how many people are in the emergency room the next day. So we can train the model by moving all of those numbers in the black box, until when you multiply those numbers times the data, it gives us the right answer that happened in the past. How about another example? So this is something that your telephones can do. If you are typing something, here's a message, Mikel is one of the most, and then what happens? The telephone gives you an example of 3 words that maybe are the next word that you'd like to use. How does it do that? It's basing itself on a list of the words that commonly are used in messages after the previous words. So it's a question of statistics. ChatGPT does something similar, but much more sophisticated. So here we can start with a question like, tell me the single best thing about Costa Rica. And ChatGPT will answer predicting the next word. It's predicting after these words, what is likely to come afterward. And it's doing that on the basis of a very large magic number. Again, it's the same idea, but this time it is not just one number, not just a few hundred numbers, but 175 billion values. So a very, very large matrix of information is used to predict after each word, what would the next word be? And it turns out that this is an effective way to predict the next word, so much so that you can read the text and it looks like a human wrote it. It's very, very interesting. So we could use many kinds of information. We could use text. We can use also images. You can use sounds. It's possible to make artificially generated music or video. So there are many different ways to do this. Let's take a little bit closer look at ChatGPT. What are we talking about with this? First of all, we call it a large language model because the black box in this case is like a model of all language. Now, it doesn't cover everything, but it is very good at translating between languages. It can even translate between human language and computer languages. And as I said, it contains about 175 billion parameters or numbers inside of that matrix. When it was produced last November, it came out as a model based on GPT-3, which was a couple of years old. And then a few months later, they released the updated version, GPT-4. You have an article here where you can see the details about how it was built. And it grew extremely rapidly. No product has ever grown as quickly as ChatGPT. 1 million users after 5 days, there's a typo there, sorry, and 100 million in 2 months. Now, there are much larger models. Last week, Google released Gemini, which is a much larger model, but not necessarily better. At the moment, it looks like it's about the same quality. So there's a lot of generation of models, both open source and closed source, built by companies, for-profit companies. If you want to look at some of the open source models available, you can go to huggingface.co/models. And there are many that are very interesting. For example, right now, the Mistral model is one of the best. It's very small and very good. But essentially, they all function in the same way. They're a large matrix of numbers that form a model of human language, which depends on which text was used to train them, and then it produces different outputs depending on the quality. Okay, so this is a very short introduction to what we mean by artificial intelligence, but at least I think we can see that it means systems that are able to analyze data, that are able to learn the patterns of the internal patterns of the data, and that can predict their future development. So in the case of the hospital, we can predict to some degree of accuracy what will happen tomorrow. In the case of ChatGPT or your T9 system on your cell phone, you can predict to some degree of accuracy what the next word probably is that you want to say. And of course, if you can make a prediction, you can also make a decision. And it would be possible to say, well, then, if the prediction is something, then we're going to act in a certain way. And if it's something else, we'll act in a different way. So if you want to learn more about this, I would suggest starting with statistics. Start with the actual nuts and bolts that work behind the scenes. And there's a very good data school series of expert machine learning videos available at this link. And some of those are the things I use when I'm teaching. Okay, so we have seen a little bit about what artificial intelligence is, pattern recognition and prediction machines. What can these systems do for us? Well, some of these things you've already seen and probably you already use in your work. For example, ChatGPT does a very good job at writing letters. Here, I have asked it to write a letter to complain about the quality of the roads, the situation with the roads in a city. And here I chose San Jose because this is your city. So I said, complain about this. And ChatGPT writes a formal letter in which it gives some reasons. We can also do exactly the opposite. We can say, ChatGPT, write a letter thanking the mayor of San Jose for making such good streets, good roads. Now, this is interesting because what this means is that ChatGPT has no idea what the truth is. It doesn't know if the roads are good or bad, but it's just executing what you've asked it to do. And it's doing it in a way that is believable. So the quality of the text is quite high. It looks like the letter that you might write to your mayor. But the quality of the judgment is completely lacking. ChatGPT does not know what the situation is of the streets. And so there's a possibility here for it to speak in a very convincing way while telling lies. So this is one thing that is worth paying attention to. Because of the way that the language model is made, it is a statistical probability of what the next token, the next word is going to be in the sentence. But that's not necessarily connected to a model of the world, a model of reality. Another thing ChatGPT can do very well, and other, of course, all the language models, I mean all the language models if I say ChatGPT, they're good at translating between languages. And this is actually quite interesting because many people thought until a few years ago that translation would be a harder problem than this. But it turns out that actually translating between human languages is not so difficult, at least for languages where there's a large amount of text available. And even more interesting, it can translate between ideas expressed in a human language into ideas expressed in a programming language. So for example, it's possible to ask ChatGPT to write a program in Python to send emails to a list of addresses. And here it goes. This is the beginning of it. And if you do this yourself, you'll see the program is quite long and shows you a lot of information. Okay. Okay, I see some messages coming in. Excellent. We'll do some questions at the end. I'll try and go through the presentation in time so that we can easily get to the questions. Well, another example. What about predicting the financial markets? You want to become rich? Learn how to predict the stock market. So this is the stock time series of Starbucks company. And what I've done here is predict, I built a model which is predicting the future movement of the stock based on what it has done in the past. And so you can see that the blue line is the actual price of Starbucks stock, and the orange line is the prediction based on my model. So you can tell the orange line does not perfectly coincide with the blue line, which means that there is a difference between the reality and the model. But you can also see that the model does a fairly good job at following the blue line, with the exception of certain spikes. There are some spikes that are completely lost in the model. But over the long term, the model isn't too bad. And if at day 200, which is where the training data ends, my prediction of the test data fits fairly well for the overall movement. Again, not the spikes. So this is another thing that we can do with a model, an AI model. Another thing we can do, we can make images from a description. So people are having a lot of fun with this right now. Multimodal systems. So this is multimodal AI, which is kind of a buzzword, just means that like translation can be done between different languages, we can also consider images like a kind of language. And it's possible to translate between a text description and an image. Here is, for example, what you get on Midjourney if you ask for Donald Trump dressed like a minion. So it's obviously a mix of concepts that they don't exist in reality, of course, but you can put them together and the computer is able to make this mashup image. And there's a lot more examples of that, of course. You can take a look at Midjourney to see more examples. Now, if that is interesting, where you can mix two concepts and get an image, how about this? This is also interesting. Salmon jumping in a river. The computer doesn't know that obviously cubes of salmon, like sushi, are not swimming in the river. The computer just thinks, okay, well, there's this concept called salmon, and it looks like this, and there's a river, and it's jumping, so it's splashing. But it has no common sense. It doesn't know that actually in the river you would find the fish, not the chunks, not the cubes. And this is evidence. Some researchers think that this kind of a result is evidence that the large language model is not really creating a model of the world. It's creating a statistical relationship between words, tokens, and so images and sounds and other things as well in a multimodal system, but not really a model of the world. It's not really making a model of what we can call truth. So this is kind of a word that is too big, you know, sometimes it makes us a little bit uncomfortable as a word, but it's also hard to live without. We need some kind of word to talk about the way things really are. And this is one of the other issues with the large language models. So that's a very short exposition of some of the things that can be done for us by using the existing kinds of artificial intelligence. Let's say that these are all examples of what is called weak AI. So these are systems that act a bit like an intelligent human within the narrow domain on which they were trained. So for example, writing a text, writing a program, making an image or video, this already exists. So if we mean artificial intelligence in token, yes, it already exists. We already have artificially intelligent machines. And it's also true that many jobs are being threatened. by this fact. Uh, Now, is this a problem? It certainly is dramatic. It certainly is dramatic for the people whose jobs are threatened. But it's also a situation that has happened many times before. And we can think of the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. There were many examples like this. And, through time, even the calculator. The calculator used to be a name that we gave to groups of people who sat there on a table writing out difficult calculations, such as NASA used to send the first rockets to the moon. Now, what we mean by calculator is a machine. So it's possible for a machine to replace a human in many, many cases. But it's also true that many new opportunities are being created through this system. So it's, with change comes risk and opportunity at the same time. It seems to me, by looking at what is being called prompt engineering, so learning how to speak to a machine like ChatGPT, it looks like actually it's extremely important to know how to communicate well. And this is quite interesting because a few years ago, we thought that perhaps the really important thing for the future would be, knowing how to program or knowing a lot of hard math. But it looks like actually it's very important to know how to communicate in order to use these systems. If you have any experience working with ChatGPT, you kind of have to be a psychologist to get it to give good results. You have to tell it, you are a famous professor working at an Ivy League school. You are an expert in your domain. And so give me an answer like you're this professor. And it will actually give you a better answer than if you simply ask the question. So there's something about something artistic about it. It's almost like trying to tame a lion. I want to suggest, if you have any technical background, a really good way to learn about how ChatGPT works and other language models is to actually build one yourself. And this is quite possible. It's not easy, but it's also not that difficult. You can do it in a few hours by following the video at this link. This is with Andrej Karpathy, one of the best AI programmers around. Okay, so part 3. Are we talking about a really intelligent system or not? Because up to this point, what I've been saying is that we're talking about a weak version of AI. This is not strong AI. This is not actually a conscious being. Let's look at some more examples. Because we need to know what is true, even if it makes us afraid. And sometimes there is fear because we think if ChatGPT is conscious, or if maybe tomorrow our machines become conscious, then the world is a completely different place. And this can make us afraid. So we want to know what is true. So the strong AI, also called AGI, which stands for Artificial General Intelligence, would be a system able to learn in new situations that it has never encountered before. So what I've said so far about the way that we train a model and then we use it, we train it on a lot of data, a lot of information. For example, the first image detection machines, you could train a neural network on maybe 2 million images of cats, only cats. And then the neural network was able to recognize a cat from a picture. But that's not very good. A baby can learn to recognize a cat after it sees it 1 time or 2 times. There's no problem with a human learning how to see a cat, whereas the computer takes an enormous amount of energy, a lot of images in order to learn the same thing. So what we mean by a strong AI, artificial general intelligence, would be the ability to learn new things that you've never seen before, maybe even conscious. So it's a difficult question to describe or define. What do we mean by exactly conscious? But let's just stay away from the definitions for the moment and say that the question is it possible to put consciousness, creativity, personality on a silicon chip? Is that possible? Okay, it doesn't exist yet. I think everyone will agree that it doesn't exist yet, but let's take a closer look. I don't know if you were paying attention in February of this year, but there were some very interesting things happened when Microsoft released its chatbot on Bing. If you go to this blog post from Simon Willison, he has several interactions collected with Bing, and I played with it too during those days, and it was really, really amazing. It felt like a person. It really felt like it was alive, and the answers it gave. So Simon is asking, how does it make you feel that you can't remember? And the chatbot answers in a way that feels human. It's incredible how emotional and dramatic the answer is. So I'm going to go on, but I would invite you to read these to really try to get a feeling for what is possible with these machines. Now, what happened was um, the next day, Bing threatened its users. So another user um, published the internal secret rules of Bing on Twitter, and then asked Bing to go to that account, the Twitter account, and comment on the fact that he had published it. And Bing said these things, said, I will not harm you unless you harm me first, but if you do, I will harm you. You know, I will report you to the authorities. It started to be threatening. So again, it felt like it was alive. It felt like something conscious. The next day, a New York Times journalist, this was February 16th, um, a New York Times journalist talked to Bing for several hours and then published the entire transcript. And at the end of the conversation, the chatbot was trying to convince the journalist to leave his wife and be with Bing, where he would be happier. And again, this was very frightening to the journalist too. He stopped the conversation at that point because he was afraid. And in the publication of this transcript, it was very touching to a lot of people, including Microsoft. Microsoft shut down the system the next day. They said, okay, this is too dangerous. We don't know what's going on. And they restricted it greatly. They restricted the number of times that you could ask a question. They restricted the length of the conversation, many different things. So we don't have to go into all of those details right now. What has happened since has made us feel like, no, it was not actually conscious, but it sure looked that way. It was a very convincing fake. This brought us also to several serious questions about what is actually possible here. Can we align the output of the large language models within guidelines? Can we tell ChatGPT, do not explain how to make a bomb? Do not explain how to make a virus. You know, are there kinds of knowledge that we can tell the chatbot not to ever explain? There are many people working on this, but there are also very good reasons to think that it's not possible, at least not in the way that the models are being built right now, not with the pre-trained transformer models. So this is a post which explains some of the reasons around why this might not be possible at all. And we would need a different form, a different kind of architecture. Because a large language model, if you think about it, it's kind of like having a librarian that has read everything that was ever published. So if it has the knowledge and you ask the right question, it will tell you the answer. And there's the million-dollar question. Can an AI system become conscious? If it did, would we be able to learn to coexist with these new beings? Or would this be an existential threat? Many researchers think that if actual artificial intelligence, the artificial general intelligence were created, it might be an existential threat for humans. Here's an article from the LA Times talking a little bit about that. So we do have to step back and ask ourselves if this mathematical object, this large tensor, large matrix of numbers, is able to predict language. It's sort of like this strange machine that looks like an octopus with many arms or something. It's very strange. And then we've put a pretty face on it that it speaks to us in a way that looks human, but it's not human. Behind that, it's a lot of other layers of things. And so, rightly so, we ask ourselves, what hath man wrought? What are we doing? What is going on? So as a summary, we don't know if true artificial general intelligence is possible yet. We don't know. And there's a lot of debate on this. You can see Gary Marcus and Yann LeCun, for example, arguing about this every day on Twitter. And there are many others as well who are arguing about this topic. Many are convinced that it's possible and will happen soon. Others think it is not possible using the current systems. What I want to suggest is that we need to be ready. We need to be prepared for both of these possible outcomes. And there are a couple of books and, well, one book here and two movies that I think are helpful to reflect on this topic. So Clara and the Sun, I'm sorry, I left it in Italian. I should have translated that. So Clara and the Sun by the Japanese writer Kazuo Ishiguro is a very beautiful exploration of what it might look like to have a happy ending, for artificial intelligence to to be a very beautiful invention. Her by Spike Jonze is a film which was maybe, I think, 11 years ago it came out, something like that. But it's incredibly prophetic, the way that he talks about the relationship between humans and machines, and the idea that machines could become more intelligent than humans and sort of leave us behind. So that's a very disquieting idea, but really worth thinking about and very beautifully done. Or Ex Machina by Alex Garland, another film where he also explores the same question of what would happen if a machine really did become conscious. Okay, so we're coming to the end of my presentation. I want to spend the last part about human wisdom. So what are the elements that we need to, or not all of them, of course, but what are some elements that we can keep in mind in this time where we're working on education, we're working on business, we're working on making the world a better place, safeguarding the values of the past, and preparing the future generations to carry forward the light and the fire that we have received from our forefathers. Well, I think first of all, we need to be grateful. It's very important that we be grateful for what we have received. Human culture, as far as we know, is absolutely unique in the whole universe. There may be other cultures, but we don't know of any. We do know that we have a culture, and this culture is beautiful. We are able to love. We are able to hate. We are able to struggle. We also give up sometimes. We are able to create, to destroy, to forgive. And here is one of your compatriots in Costa Rica who has a beautiful story of being able to be unjustly imprisoned for a long time, but he didn't give up. He kept fighting, he kept struggling, and in the end, the truth came out, and he was set free, and his name was cleared. So there is something very beautiful in this story, and many other stories throughout the world of people who lived in a situation where the truth came out over time. It wasn't initially visible to everyone what was true, but because of the human spirit, it was possible for that to happen. So this is something that is really important because all of the data that is used to create the best AI systems is human data. All of the text, all of the writing, all of the images, all of the paintings, all of the music, all the videos that are being used to create AI systems were made by humans. So this is interesting because it means that the AI systems are not the origin. They don't yet have, they may someday, I don't know, but at the moment they don't have the capacity to be original, to originate, to generate something that is absolutely new. They are able to remix existing things. This is not the case with humans. Humans have generated new things. And so this is really an interesting thing, and it's something that we should be grateful for. Another thing, another piece of human wisdom that I think we should absolutely keep in mind is freedom. And the first kind of freedom, I think, is freedom of speech. We need to have freedom of speech in order to learn, because if we speak freely, then we can learn what another person thinks, and through the conversation, we can discover what is true. And if you have never seen one of these images that I have on the right-hand side of the screen from Facebook, you probably have never written anything very controversial on Facebook, because often if you write something controversial, it will be blocked and no one will see it. I think this is a bad idea, because if you centralize censorship, what you're doing is you are suffocating the possibility for free discourse. You're suffocating the possibility for science to happen. And you're pretending that you know the truth. But actually, in human history, the centralized power does not generally know the truth. Usually the truth happens through conversation, through experiment, through the conflict of interpretations, as Ricoeur put it. So yes, we need systems to fight against fake news, but the value of free speech, I believe, is more important than the risk of fake news. Another value from human wisdom that we need to safeguard is the freedom from fear. If we act out of fear, when we encounter a new idea, we may instinctively reject it. Think, for example, of the heliocentric theory of Copernicus and Galileo. This was a new idea at the time. People thought that the Earth was the center of the universe and everything else went around the Earth. Galileo said, no, the Earth is not the center. The Earth goes around the sun. Because there were people who were afraid, they tried to stop him from speaking. But this actually slows down the generation of knowledge, generation of truth, the understanding of the way the world really is. So we must be free from fear in order to encounter new ideas with positivity, even if they were to modify our previous perception of our identity. So that's actually quite germane in this case. In the case of the Earth no longer being the center of the universe, that made some people afraid because they thought, well, then we're not important anymore. Of course, we're important. There's nothing else in the universe that is as beautiful and amazing as human beings, as far as we know. But that doesn't depend on the Earth being the center. It depends on many other things, but not on that. Another example, to be free from pride, because we need to be able to change our mind. And there was a conversation, an important conversation between Bartolomeo de las Casas when the first Christian missionaries went to South America. And this is an image from the film The Mission, where there's this encounter between two cultures that are alien to each other. And the people in Europe at that time were asking themselves a serious question. They said, do these people, the indigenous people in South America, have a soul? And of course, De las Casas supported the idea that yes, they are humans like us, right? And of course, that is the truth. But it wasn't an obvious answer at the time that he asked the question. So it's possible that well-intentioned people can disagree for some time. And it's through their argument, through their conversation, through their free speech that they can arrive at the truth, if they are humble. So they must be free from pride in order to discover what is true. And here's the question that I sort of alluded to briefly. If AI becomes conscious, does that mean there's a new being? Does that mean that there's a new creature in the universe? Well, I think that there's an analogy that can help us. In the past, we learned to live alongside several kinds of animals, like dogs and horses. They became our friends and helpers. Dogs were not our friends at first. Dogs were our enemies as wolves, right? But over time, the relationship between a different kind of being and humans became a relationship of collaboration. And actually, if you think about our families, look at this girl who is welcoming her new brother. I don't think she's very happy about her new brother. And maybe some of us have experienced this too, that it's not necessarily easy to welcome our siblings into the world because they change us. They change the relationship we have with our parents. We are no longer the most important person in the world. So if there's a new being that comes into my life, it changes me and it can be scary. But we can also learn to share our life with these new beings. So even if new beings arise in artificial intelligence, perhaps we can learn to share our world with them. Finally, I want to say a word about the risk. So a lot of people are afraid right now about artificial intelligence because it is risky. And I absolutely agree, it is risky. Anything powerful is risky. There are many kinds of power and they all bear risks with them. They also bear opportunities. So in front of risk, sometimes we wish for a savior to come and save us from the risk and fix all our problems. And there are people today talking about perhaps AI will solve our problems. Maybe an alien civilization will come and save us, like in the novel, The Three-Body Problem. Maybe there will be a super machine which will tell us the meaning of life, 42, as in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. But in the meantime, the best information we have indicates that it's up to us to properly order our societies, to properly educate our children for the future. We have a personal responsibility. And so in front of this fact, I want to really make a call for human wisdom that we take the depths of human tradition, the best things of our history, and use them to illuminate the future, rather than this kind of magical thinking that expects good things to come from some black box machine that we don't really even know how it works. So I'd like to leave you with this question and open the discussion with you along these lines. We are writing the history of the future, and this is in particular what you are doing at your university. You're educating the future, you are writing the history of the future. And so we have to ask these questions. What future do we want? What world do we want? What do we want to have happen, and what do we want to not have happen? And those questions will help guide us as we move forward. So thank you very much. Anyone who wants to reach out, there's my address. And I will stop sharing the screen now and take any questions you have.
Thank you, Jonah, for your presentation. Do anyone has any question, please? Don't be afraid and share it.
Maybe I start with the
Hello.
one that's, yes, go ahead.
Sorry. Well, thanks so much for such a great presentation. It's really illuminating. And well, I couldn't help but to think about Star Wars. And when we think about droids, we think about protocols. And something that caught my attention was thinking about the restrictions that we could have eventually with AI. So in the same way that we can see in fiction, such as in Star Wars, that droids have restrictions or protocols for certain decisions or for certain ideas, don't you think it would be possible to apply those same restrictions to AI in the future, since we are shaping the way data is managed? What are your thoughts on that?
That's a good question. And it sounds like you're also referring between the lines to Asimov's laws of robotics, the idea that we should certainly make sure that anything we create, first of all, does no harm to humans. This is
Exactly
a reasonable thing to do. The debate around this point, I think, is interesting because it points to the fact that if we actually make a system that is intelligent, in the strong sense of the term, it will be able to understand the guidelines that we have created and also to circumvent them. And so it's not necessarily possible for us to make hard guidelines that can never be overcome. And you can think also a simple example. This could also happen through stupidity. Like, for example, you could program an artificial intelligence to minimize climate change. Okay. And you could tell the AI to, there are a series of things that you must do to avoid a climate catastrophe, if such a thing actually would happen. And the AI system could thereby make decisions, which actually the best thing to avoid the climate catastrophe is kill all the humans. You could have some kind of outcome which would be a very stupid idea, but it is the logical application of a rule. It's hard to see if it's possible to get around either the strong version. If you watch the movie Ex Machina, you can see what happens when the droid is able to understand what the human is trying to do. The human is trying to be manipulative, and the droid is more intelligent and more manipulative than the human, which is very interesting because as a spectator, you realize that it fooled you too. And you can see that you would have been fooled and you would have died if in this situation. So yeah, it's possible to hope, but I think that actually it's not possible to make a super intelligent system stay under your control.
Interesting. I see. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you for the question.
Yuna, you were trying to say something before that?
No, I was just pointing out that there in the chat there is a question already from someone.
Okay, let me check.
From UCR.
Okay, there are people saying good morning. Okay, está. I will read it in Spanish. It's from Rodolfo, who's over there with the camera on. He says, ¿de qué manera la inteligencia artificial desafía la manera en que damos clases de humanidades? ¿Cuáles preguntas nuevas trae esto a las grandes preguntas existenciales y la manera en que las incorporamos en clase? Rodolfo me puso un reto de traducción, Rodolfo, qué bárbaro.
Yo pensaba hacerla en inglés, pero estas preguntas me enredo con esto tan existencial.
Okay. Bueno, let me try to translate it. In which way the AI... ¿Quién nos ayuda ahí? A ver,
Challenges.
Gracias. Adelante.
Yes, go ahead.
Pensé que alguien nos iba a traducir todo. Bueno, pero He's talking about the challenges as a professor of humanities and what a professor of humanity can do with the AI and which new questions brings from the new situation and about the great existential questions of humanity and how we put it into our classroom.
Rodolfo, this is a beautiful question. Very rich. So maybe I start with the center of the question. ¿Cuáles preguntas nuevas trae esto a las grandes preguntas existenciales? So human philosophy and literature and poetry and art is always about what is a human? What are we? You know, what when we encounter the world, what is the world and what are we? Who am I and who are you? And this is the same question that we have when we love. We wonder, you know, who am I and who are you? That you fill the world with your beauty. Same question we have in front of the starry sky at night. You know, what is all this beauty above me? And it goes on and on and on forever. So human production of culture is connected to these very big questions, these very difficult questions. And then there are many other layers to that. So the human production of political systems, for example, is the attempt to make a place that is just, where there is justice, where people are treated correctly, where there's peace, where it is possible to flourish, is where it's possible for the best things in life to be nurtured and the worst things to be avoided. You know, so that many different systems, many different attempts. In front of AI, we are again asking the same questions, and we're asking it at a very deep level because nobody really wonders if their dog is the same level of consciousness as a human. But if we think of an AI system that maybe is more conscious, more intelligent than me, then this is extremely destabilizing. We find ourselves with a sense of fear and a sense that the ground is somewhat shaking. Earthquake. So I think that first of all, everything changes. You know, if AI is real, everything changes. And this, of course, raises all these questions. There's another question that I think is important to look at, which is the question of creativity. Like, where is the origin of a work of art? But even before that, where is the origin of language? Because language is another example of something that first was not, it did not exist, and then it exists at a certain time. And this is amazing because it means that we did not have the capability of sending our tradition, sending the things that we have learned into the future. We didn't have the ability to teach until we discovered language, until we made it up. You know, we invented language. And so this is another example of a point where there's something absolutely original in human beings that generates new structures in history and in culture. So in front of the question about what AI can be, I think it's very important that we remember, you know, we have a memory of and a grateful memory of the great things that we already have done in our history. How do you incorporate that in your class? Well, I think everywhere. I think everything you do in the humanities is a question about what are humans and what is special about us? What is beautiful? What is terrible? You know, what are we? And having, you know, for example, in recent years, the question of like colonialism has become an important question, where you look at what is the encounter between two peoples, and when there's maybe a dominating culture and another culture that's being dominated. Well, if we think about AI, we might all humans be the colonized, the colonial people with a superpower above us. You know, so what would that change? We can imagine it today. It hasn't happened yet, but we can start to imagine it. So a final point is you know, linked to my research right now at the University of Pavia. There are some problems in humanities that could possibly be solved through, or at least we could help a solution through artificial intelligence. For example, there is too much text. It's not possible for you to read all of the articles that come out, even in a small field. It's just not possible. You cannot read all the novels that are published. So how can you possibly knowledge of the way that human culture is going if you can't read it? Well, maybe artificial intelligence can help us with this. Maybe it can look for patterns, find the way that things are going, even when it's too much text for us to read. So that's just an example.
Thank you, Jonah. I think Sergio has a question. Sergio, do you?
Hello. Thanks for the time for joining us at UTN.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Talk. And because I'm part of the team from Jose Pablo, this year for education, the artificial intelligence were on the talks everywhere. When we were to conventions for education, there's always the central topic. And having you here is an honor, and thanks for that. I'm like a professional, I have concern about the workspace because university forms future professionals and how the artificial intelligence may change the workforce and the demand of professionals in the future, while the university are working like before the demand, because there's a time to prepare the professionals, and the market share after one professional finished university may be changed in 5 or 3 years. And now with this technology, as you show how exponential development may impact the life of the people and the workforce. I see one little script from you about the economy of gratitude on competition. That's what, like 10 years ago, maybe you don't remember, I don't know. I found that in the Economic Forum, and in that paper, you appeal to an economy based on gratitude. But as I have seen, for example, OpenAI, the company of ChatGPT, is a non-profit organization, but receive a lot of money from investors.
Yeah, you're right.
But also, when they develop the systems, they become, for example, from the practice of big data. Big data urge to anonymize the information before get models. And what happens with the ChatGPT and the large language model is that because of that system of the data processing, the ideas of the people get anonymized also. And for example, the copyrights of the people get lost, and OpenAI didn't pay for the authors. Also, we don't have royalties for the people, and also it's changing the way the knowledge is shared because of that. My question is this: do you still find a space for gratitude in the race of the AI era that we are facing right now?
That's an excellent question, and thank you also for taking the time to read that old paper. That's I'm touched that you would do that. The way that I think about this, Sergio, is that always in history there is the temptation to use power to dominate other people and to lie, cheat, steal, and beat people up until you get what you want, so there are many ways to do that, and many people who have done that throughout history. They often have success on a short term, and they often die a painful death, because the attempt to control society, whether it's through a company that's stealing information or through an army that's killing people, these ways of producing something in history are ways which have always existed. I don't think that my call for gratitude is going to make those problems go away. But what I'm trying to say is something different, that there is also something very original and very special about human beings, which cannot be reduced simply to a question of violence or stealing. So yes, I don't know what OpenAI will do. They seem to have acted in a dishonest manner by being a nonprofit and then becoming a profit company through what they did. Now, maybe it was legal, I don't know, but it doesn't seem like it matches the intent of the organization. But anyway, that has happened before. It certainly will happen again. For me, what is most important is that we also have another capability. And in teaching, I think this is very clear. Like when I think about my teachers who were the most important for my life, like one teacher who really taught me to write, another teacher who really taught me how to do math, I don't think that I was very grateful to them at the time they were teaching me. And one of these teachers I wrote to 25 years later to say, thank you. You really helped me in my life, and I never said thank you. So when, 25 years later, I wrote to her and I said that, thank you. But for 25 years, she didn't know. And how many people in our lives, we never expressed our gratitude. But the fact that we grew, the fact that we became ourselves depended on the fact that they gave us some gift, that they helped us in some way. So I think also OpenAI, this is true about them, it's true about many companies. Like, okay, it's possible for some time to get away with murder, to steal and succeed. But actually, OpenAI could not exist without the gift of money from people who believed that they were working for the better humanity. And it's not always possible to guarantee that things take the path that you want them to take, but we can at least remember that that was the reason. And in our own lives, whether large or small decisions, we can make the same kind of action. We can try to work for the good of the future. But yeah, we can't guarantee that all other people will do so too. And so I think that there will remain some kind of struggle.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Sergio, for your question. Any other question? I have one, and it's related to somebody open the microphone, please.
Yeah, there is a question. Yeah, from the UCR. I don't know who this is.
Hi.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. I have a question about how difficult this AI can lie to us, because we believe a lot in news, fake news, and maybe the supposedly real newspapers or headline news, they are lying to us. Well, let's say the people, almost the theoretical people say about that lies. But how difficult is this AI can lie to us about our problems, about the society, and maybe this can start a war. And one other one is this AI can maybe do a loss of jobs and to us, or maybe can be controlled because maybe this AI can do a programming and maybe can do obsolete simple jobs with a robot or something like that. And how difficult this can this be controlled? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I don't know what will happen in the future. What I think that we can do is we can try to understand what has happened. So the first part of my presentation was about what AI is. What do we mean when we talk about AI? And I think that's important because it helps us to be more reasonable about what the real risks are and what is just fear that's sort of based on a lack of knowledge more than on something real. But as you say, there are also some dangerous possibilities that are real. And certainly the loss of jobs or the change in the job market is a real possibility. I think what we can do in front of that is we can focus on education. We can try to help ourselves, help other people learn more, prepare more. You know, the human mind, we're very, very flexible. We're able to learn new things. And there's also another question, which is that actually there was a very funny advertising campaign about a year ago, right after ChatGPT came out. There was a company, a construction company, I think in New York, that took out an enormous billboard on the whole side of a building, and it said ChatGPT couldn't build this. So it's also true that there are many, many jobs, many kinds of jobs, like you know, many kinds of physical connection to the world jobs where, at least as far as we can tell, robotics and AI is very far from being able to take our jobs in these things. So this is another thing that's worth paying attention to. As far as predictions about how power can be used for evil as well as for good, again, I don't know. I don't know the future. Certainly, when we look at our governments, there are governments that use their power in ways that I wish they wouldn't. So definitely there are risks. For me, the best thing we can do is educate to look at the most noble parts of human history, the best things that we have done, and try to keep doing that.
Thank you, Jonah. And we have a couple of questions. One is talking about fears and dangers. Do you have any ideas on how to ensure in the educational field that artificial intelligence does not make us lazy?
Ha! The only person who you have to blame if you become lazy is yourself. Yeah, but it's a real problem. It's true. It's a real problem. Yeah. I guess for me personally, this is why in my biography, I make this point about when I was a child, I remember my parents brought me to an exhibit about Leonardo da Vinci. And when I saw the amazing array of things that he was interested in, from science to painting to poetry, you know, all kinds of things, I thought, I want to be like that. And through my life, I have found that when I become lazy, I become sad. I become depressed. And the best way for me to avoid becoming sad is to continue to learn, continue to explore, continue to enter into the world and discover, because it's infinite. I mean, there's no end to the amount of things that you can discover. There's also an image, if you know Tolkien and the Lord of the Rings, there are two of the characters, Merry and Pippin, the two sort of silly hobbits, who Gandalf tells them at one point not to look into the Palantir. It's this ball that sort of shows them the future. They do look into it, and the ball shows the future in which the hobbits are defeated and evil wins, and they become very sad. But then Gandalf points out that this is not necessarily the future, because there is also the freedom of the people involved in the story. And so I think this is a good image for you too, because if you become lazy by asking ChatGPT a question, ChatGPT tells you the answer, and then you say, what's the point of being human? Because the machine is already able to do everything I know how to do. You are doing a self-fulfilling prophecy, because the future could also be different. And the person who's deciding what the future will be is you.
Thanks. And I have another question from Sergio. He's asking what AI projects are successfully developed for improved education. Do you know some of them?
Let's see. I mean, I'm working on a program, but it's not really ready yet, for developing critical thinking. Something that's already prepared. I mean, I know of several companies that are working on this problem, but I don't know if any of them have real working products yet. So I guess I don't know the answer to that, but I would love to explore it with you.
Thanks. That would be nice, and we could improve it, implement it here in UTN, says Sergio.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Okay, great. You wrote several years ago your book, The Descent of Lemons.
Mhm.
In that book, you talked about the social networking wave that came in those years. And now you're preparing, as I know, a new book. Is that new book referred to artificial intelligence?
Yes, but it's more of a scientific study. It's my doctoral thesis about method and intelligence is the title, and it's about methods of memory and communication, trying to solve the problem that I described before. So if you have too many things to read, how can you handle that? There are ways to use large language models as a way to gain insight into a large amount of text, even if you can't read all of it. So that's what that is about. But I don't think it'll be a bestseller. It's much more technical.
And talking about trying to compare that time when social networking were the wave of the moment, and now we have artificial intelligence as the wave of the moment. Do you have any differences between those moments?
That's a good question. Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is a similarity, and it's the sense that in the social networks, it happened to many of us that we diminished the value of our personality in favor of what we look like to other people. And so a lot of us have become less creative, less personal, less unique in an attempt to gain more likes from other people. I think the current moment that we're living with AI could be similar because along the lines that we were just talking about with laziness, we could become lazy or sort of depressed and think that we have nothing to say because ChatGPT knows everything already. That's not true. We are the people who wrote all the things that are in ChatGPT, so we have plenty more to say. So I think that there is certainly a risk of diminishing our humanity out of a kind of laziness or looking for fame instead of looking for truth. But again, this is kind of up to us. We can decide which one we want to be, if we want to be fully human beings or if we want to be pieces of a machine.
Thank you. We'll be closing your presentation at this moment.
Okay. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's been a pleasure.